In an earlier episode of this podcast, I was talking to Ronsley Vars, and I opened that by saying that when I asked ChatGPT what my greatest fear was, it said it was the fear of becoming irrelevant, FOBI. But I thought it's more fun. There's the phrase FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. I would love to create the phrase FOBO, which is the fear of becoming obsolete. This is a really real thing. I am constantly trying to reinvent myself, and I don't even know why, because I'm not actually obsolete at the moment. Business is great. I'm enjoying what I'm doing, but I always live in the future. If you haven't picked that up, I constantly have to remind myself to be in the present. That's why I love, playing sport and running and doing anything active, because it just rattles me into being in the moment. Because usually my mind it's always 5 minutes ahead at a minimum. So I actually did this post because it's top of mind for me. And anytime I'm trying to work through something, I find it's helpful to share it. I like sharing it out loud because A, I consolidate my thinking around it. B, I get to see if it's validated, if anyone else is thinking along the same thing. I like solving challenges that I'm currently going through versus made up challenges. Hence the podcast First Time Facilitator. I created that podcast because my boss was sending me all around the world running workshops. I had no idea how to do it, so I had to learn quickly. So really that whole podcast was work in public, the idea of working transparently, building as you go, building on the fly. And this whole thing around FOBO, the fear of becoming obsolete, I mean, it's really why it's driven this podcast, because I get this place where I get to share ideas, work in public over the course of the year, and we'll see where that lands. Now, I'm taking this quite as a meta level because I'm looking at what are my topics for my next book, and I've been playing around with hundreds of concepts. I tell you what, hundreds. But it's really interesting. So recently, my friends Petra Zink and Micah Nohouse, we took over each other's LinkedIn accounts and basically wrote really nice words about each other and what it's like. Some of them brutal honesty in terms of what it's like to know each other. And Petra Zinks, shout out to Petra, I know she listens to the show. She shared some things about me that I didn't really think were unique to me, which is the value of working with someone else, having mentors that you trust as well. And there's a couple of lines here that she shared that I think, So she wrote, if you already follow Leanne, you know she's just not at the top of her game in facilitation, leadership, and creating unforgettable experiences. Thanks, Petra. She's setting new standards before the rest of us even realize there's a game to play. Try to copy her, good luck. By the time you do, she's already 4 steps ahead, sipping Prosecco while executing her next big thing, and probably doesn't even remember the move you're trying to replicate. Okay, I'm just going to pause there because this is not about me reading this out loud to you in terms of what she wrote, because I want to make this useful for you. But what is so interesting in that is that even when she's recognized that she might be ahead, but I already still think I'm behind, which is so interesting. Hence why I sort of force myself to just try to come up with new things, new ideas as well. And I guess this concept around being uncopyable or inimitable is being so unique is, I think it's going to be a really an emerging thing when it comes to the work of AI, because if we have platforms that democratize things and everyone has the same access to the same tools, ideation and execution become easier for everyone and faster because we can all use the same platforms to do that. Why would a client choose you over someone else? So that idea compelled me to write this LinkedIn post, I'm surprised actually how much this post has blown up in terms of the commentary around it. So this is the post that I wrote. Leanne, aren't you worried someone will steal your ideas? I hear this all the time. And truthfully, yes, there have been times where this has hurt me, when I've been frustrated when someone else has run with an idea without acknowledgement. Hey, I'm human. Then I realized that was seriously just wasted energy. Ideas aren't the hard part. The real differentiator is how fast you act on them and how you use them in the context of the problem you're trying to solve. How good are you at adaptation? Most people aren't short on ideas. They're stuck because they overthink instead of test. They wait for things to be perfect before sharing. And they keep their best insights locked away, afraid someone might copy them. And here's another interesting realization. The more you share, the more cool opportunities come your way. Clients don't hire you for one idea. They hire you for how you think and operate. And if you're working within an organization, same thing. The people who get noticed aren't always the smartest. They're the ones who put ideas into motion. Now, here's the good news. AI has made execution easier than ever. Anyone can take an idea and turn it into a product, a workshop, or a presentation in hours. Here's the not so good news. When everyone is using the same tools, everything starts to look and sound the same. What does that mean? Well, it's never been easier to create, but it's also never been harder to stand out. So what can actually make you different in the 2025 market? I think it's these three things. One is your ability to see things before others do. Keep your head up, use peripheral vision. Two, it's your willingness to move before everything feels perfect. And three, it's your ability to contextualize and connect the solution for the time, the client, the industry, or the situation. As my Talk the Walk co-host and rockstar of consulting Alan Weiss says, don't you find it odd that the people with the weakest brands are the most protective of their ideas? Strong brands and people don't hoard ideas. They bet on themselves. So if you've been sitting on something waiting for the perfect moment, here's a practical way to start. Share one insight today, even if it's not fully formed. Test something in the real world. Instead of debating if it's good enough, see how people respond. Speak up in the next meeting. Get your thinking out there before someone else does. Here are a couple of questions to consider. How else can you encourage yourself or others to get started? And what's a simple way that you've stood out in a sea of sameness? That was the post. I could pull various threads on this. I want to pull out the thread on the FOBO, the Fear of Becoming Obsolete, which is linked to hoarding ideas. And I've been an idea hoarder. And even prior to this podcast, the reason I'm doing it is because I can stop hoarding ideas. Because every time I have an idea, I'm like, oh, that can become a book, and it just goes nowhere. This has been a daily practice of sharing ideas and seeing what lands. This is such a meta post, though, because I've been thinking around how to become inimitable, which is another difficult word to say. I wish that could be the title of the next book, but it's too difficult to pronounce. How do you stand out in a sea of sameness? How do you stand out in a world where everyone seems to be doing the same thing that you do? And I do think it's this ability to not only differentiate what you offer, but how you do that. And so even the speed of getting things out is a differentiator. Your ability to test things and share things and be open with your ideas is, I think it's like the best way to market this whole work in public idea, because you're bringing people along the journey with you as well. And just this line from Alan around, don't you find that the people with the weakest brands are the most protective of their ideas? Even when I look at Alan and his work, the amount of content IP out there, all the books, all the YouTube videos, you could consume hundreds of hours with his content, and he has a strong brand. Whereas I do see people that are starting their businesses that even when it comes to working with clients and handing away their slides, they are really protective of that. And for me, it's like, yeah, have the slides, because really, what is the slide worth? Honestly, without you there sharing, I mean, there's got to be an abundance mindset around this. So I guess that's a key message for today is stop hoarding your ideas. What can you share? What can you socialize? Something that's half-baked. Just have the courage to do that, because even though you might have AI giving you a lot of help and support, you still need to get over that fear of being judged online. So all the best for doing that. Tag me if you end up posting something, or just send me a note. I'd love to hear from you. And thanks so much for listening. I'll speak to you tomorrow.